The massive glass doors of Sterling Heights Financial Center swung open with a whisper, and every head in the Platinum Lounge turned at once. Not because of the doors, those opened 100 times a day for the city's wealthiest. They turned because of who walked through them. A boy, maybe 10 years old, wearing sneakers that had seen better days and a jacket 2 sizes too big like it used to belong to someone else. His name was Ethan Price, and he walked across that gleaming marble floor like he owned every inch of it. The air smelled like leather and money. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they seemed to touch the clouds. Men in $1,000 suits stood in quiet circles, discussing numbers that could buy entire neighborhoods. Women draped in jewelry that sparkled like trapped starlight sipped champagne from glasses that cost more than a week's groceries. This was the VIP floor of Sterling Heights, the kind of place where billionaires came to grow their billions, where politicians came to hide their secrets, and where ordinary people never, ever set foot. Ethan's footsteps echoed, each one felt louder than the last. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Eyes followed him, narrowing with confusion, then amusement, then something closer to disdain. A boy here, in this temple of wealth. It was like watching a sparrow fly into a cage of eagles. He reached the counter, a massive slab of polished black granite that reflected the lights above like a dark mirror. Behind it stood a man in a suit so perfectly pressed it looked like it had never been worn before. His name tag read Mr. Donovan, Senior Account Manager. He had the kind of face that smiled without meaning it, the kind that had learned long ago how to look pleasant while feeling nothing. Mr. Donovan glanced down at Ethan, his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Can I help you, son?" Ethan's voice was steady, clear, impossible to ignore. "I need to check my account balance, please." The room didn't just go quiet, it went silent, the kind of silence that happens right before something breaks. Someone behind Ethan let out a short laugh, quickly covered by a cough. Another person whispered something that sounded like adorable but felt like mockery. A woman in a pearl necklace turned to her companion and smiled like she'd just seen the funniest thing all week. Mr. Donovan's smile widened but his eyes grew colder. "Your account balance here," he said it like Ethan had just asked to park a bicycle in the middle of the room. "Young man, this floor is for premium clients only, high net worth individuals. Do you understand what that means?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, sir. My grandfather told me I have an account here. He said when I turned 10 I could come check it myself. He passed away 2 weeks ago." His voice cracked just slightly on those last words, but he pushed through. "He made me promise I'd come here, to this floor, to this counter." The word "past" landed like a stone in water. The ripples spread outward, touching everyone in earshot. The laughter didn't stop completely, but it softened, grew uncomfortable. A few people looked away, but most kept watching, because in a place like this, vulnerability was just another form of entertainment. Mr. Donovan's expression shifted from amused to annoyed. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the counter like he was about to explain something simple to someone very slow. "Listen, kid, I don't know who your grandfather was, but this floor handles accounts with minimum balances in the millions. Millions, we're talking investments, portfolios, trust funds that could buy entire companies. Not birthday money, not savings bonds, real money, do you understand?" Ethan reached into his backpack, worn and patched in 3 places, and pulled out a folder. Inside were papers neatly organized, protected by plastic sleeves like they were the most important documents in the world. He slid the folder across the counter. "I have my identification, my account number, and the authorization letter my grandfather left with his lawyer. Everything you need is right there." For just a second, something flickered across Mr. Donovan's face. Uncertainty maybe, or curiosity. He picked up the folder like it might bite him and flipped it open. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then he stopped. His face went very still. Behind Ethan, a man in a charcoal suit leaned toward his friend, voice dripping with contempt. "Probably some kind of welfare account. Government program for kids whose parents can't handle their own finances. I've seen it before. They open accounts with $100 and act like they're Rockefeller." The friend laughed, loud enough for Ethan to hear. "Or maybe Granddad left him a savings bond from 1987. What's that worth now, $50? More laughter, cruel, casual laughter that comes easy to people who have never had to worry about $50. Ethan's hands tightened into fists at his sides, but his face stayed calm. He'd promised his grandfather he wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of people who wouldn't understand. Mr. Donovan was still reading, his finger traced down the page, stopping at a series of numbers. His eyebrows pulled together. He flipped to the next page, then the next. His jaw tightened. "What's the account number?" he asked, his voice suddenly different, sharper, more focused. Ethan recited it from memory, 479280631. Mr. Donovan typed the numbers into his computer. The screen lit up his face in pale blue light. His fingers froze on the keyboard. He stared at the screen like it was showing him something impossible, something that couldn't be real. "That's not right," he muttered, more to himself than to Ethan. He typed again, slower this time, double-checking each digit. The screen refreshed. The same information appeared. His face went pale. Behind him, another manager, a woman named Ms. Chen, noticed his expression. "Problem, Donovan." He didn't answer, he just kept staring at the screen. Ethan's heart was pounding now, but he kept his voice steady. "Is everything okay, sir?" Mr. Donovan looked up at him, and for the first time since Ethan had walked through those doors, the man looked at him like he was actually seeing him. Not a kid, not a joke, a person. "Where did you get this account number?" Mr. Donovan asked quietly. "My grandfather opened it the day I was born. He told me about it when I was 8, said it was for my future, that he'd been putting money in it since the beginning and that when he was gone, I'd understand why." The room was still watching, still listening, but the laughter had stopped completely now. Something in Mr. Donovan's face had changed and people could sense it, like sharks smelling blood in the water. Ms. Chen stepped closer, looking over Mr. Donovan's shoulder at the screen. Her eyes went wide. "That can't be right. Check the account again." He did. Same result. She leaned in closer, squinting. "Is that a decimal error?" "No," Mr. Donovan whispered, "it's not." Ethan's stomach twisted. Something was wrong. They were looking at his account like it was broken, like something terrible had happened. "Sir, is my money gone? Did someone take it?" Mr. Donovan slowly shook his head. "No, son, nothing's gone, it's all there." "Then what's wrong?" The manager looked at him, then at the screen, then back at him. "Nothing's wrong, it's just that your account balance is not what we expected." "What is it?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Donovan swallowed hard. He glanced around the room at all the watching faces, all the people who had laughed, who had mocked, who had assumed this boy was nothing. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire Platinum Lounge. "Your current account balance, including accumulated interest and investment returns over the past 10 years, is $47,362,819.14. The room exploded. Not with laughter this time, with shock, with disbelief, with the sound of champagne glasses hitting the floor and shattering into 1,000 pieces. Someone gasped so loud it sounded like a scream. The man in the charcoal suit, the one who had made the welfare joke, stood frozen with his mouth hanging open like a broken door. Ethan blinked. "Could you say that again, please?" Mr. Donovan's hands were shaking. $47 million, you have $47 million in this account. The world tilted. Ethan grabbed the edge of the counter to steady himself. His ears were ringing, his vision blurred at the edges. 47 million, that couldn't be real. That was the kind of number you heard on television. The kind of number that belonged to other people, not to a boy whose mom worked double shifts just to keep the lights on, not to a boy who wore hand-me-down clothes and ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 times a week. "How?" Ethan whispered. "How is that possible?" Ms. Chen was frantically typing on her own computer, pulling up records, transaction histories, investment portfolios. "According to this, the account was opened with an initial deposit of $50,000, then your grandfather made monthly deposits ranging from $500 to $2,000 for 10 years straight, but that's not what made it grow." "What did?" Ethan asked, his voice sounding far away like it belonged to someone else. She looked at him with something close to awe. "Your grandfather invested it. Stocks, bonds, real estate funds, tech companies right before they exploded. Every single investment he made for you hit. Some of these returns are 30, 40 times the original investment. It's like he knew exactly where to put every dollar. I've never seen anything like this." Mr. Donovan was still staring at the screen. "There are properties listed here too, real estate holdings in your name, a commercial building downtown, a rental property near the university, and stocks, dozens of companies, blue chips, startups that became giants." He looked up at Ethan and there was something like respect in his eyes now. "Your grandfather built you an empire." The room was silent again, but this time it was different. This wasn't the silence of mockery. This was the silence of people realizing they'd made a terrible mistake. People who had laughed at a boy in cheap sneakers, not knowing they were laughing at someone who could buy and sell them 10 times over. The man in the charcoal suit was staring at Ethan like he'd just seen a ghost. His face had gone from smug to pale in seconds. The woman in the pearl necklace had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror at what she'd said, what she'd thought. Ethan's legs felt weak. He wanted to sit down. He wanted to call his mom. He wanted his grandfather back so he could ask him why he'd done all this, why he'd never said anything, why he'd let them struggle when all this money was sitting here waiting. But his grandfather wasn't here anymore. He was gone. And all that was left was this number on a screen and a room full of strangers who were looking at him completely differently now. Mr. Donovan cleared his throat. His professional mask had slipped completely. He looked genuinely shaken. "Mr. Price, I apologize for my earlier tone. I had no idea who you were. If you'd like to sit down, we can discuss your account in detail. We have private offices for our platinum clients, we can." "I just wanted to check my balance," Ethan interrupted quietly. "That's all. My grandfather told me to come here, check the account, and then I'd understand. I think I understand now." "What do you understand?" Ms. Chen asked gently. Ethan's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back. He was scared. "My mom and we didn't have much. He was always worried about what would happen to us, about me. He wanted to make sure I'd be okay, that we'd be okay, so he did this. He spent 10 years building something I didn't even know existed." His voice broke on the last word. The tears came then, hot and fast, and he couldn't stop them. But he wasn't ashamed. Not anymore, because his grandfather had loved him enough to do this. To sacrifice, to save, to plan, to build a future for a boy who wore second-hand clothes and dreamed small dreams because small dreams were all that seemed possible. The room was still silent, but now people weren't watching him like entertainment. They were watching him like a person. Some looked away, ashamed. Others looked uncomfortable, confronted with their own cruelty. The woman in the pearl necklace walked over slowly. She stood beside Ethan, not speaking at first. Then very quietly she said, "I'm sorry for what I said, for laughing. Your grandfather must have been an incredible man." Ethan wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "He was the best person I ever knew." She nodded and walked away, and there was something heavy in the way she moved, like she was carrying the weight of her own words. Mr. Donovan placed a hand on the folder, spreading the papers out carefully. "There's more here, legal documents, instructions from your grandfather. He left very specific guidance on how this account should be managed, what it's meant for, when you're allowed to access different parts of it." He looked at Ethan with something like kindness. He thought of everything. Ethan nodded slowly. "Can I see the rest?" "Of course, but I should tell you there's a letter here too, sealed. It's addressed to you from him." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. A letter. Mr. Donovan pulled out an envelope, cream-colored and heavy, with Ethan's name written across the front in his grandfather's handwriting. The same handwriting that used to appear on birthday cards and Christmas notes and little messages left on the kitchen table. Ethan took the envelope with trembling hands. He didn't open it yet. He couldn't, not here, not in front of all these people. "Can I take this home?" he asked. "It's yours," Mr. Donovan said. "Everything here is yours, but before you go, there's something you should know." Ethan looked up at him. "Your grandfather left instructions that you're not to access the full account until you're 18, but there's a monthly allowance set up for you and your mother. $20,000 a month deposited automatically into a secondary account he opened in your mother's name. It starts today." $20,000 a month. Ethan's mom made less than that in 6 months. His mind couldn't process the number. It felt fake, impossible, like a dream he'd wake up from any second. "Why didn't he tell us?" Ethan whispered. "Why did he let us struggle?" Miss Chen answered, her voice soft. "There's a note in the file from him. He says he wanted you to understand the value of hard work, to grow up humble, to know what it meant to earn something before you inherited wealth. He didn't want money to define you, he wanted character to define you first." Ethan closed his eyes. That sounded exactly like something his grandfather would say. He could almost hear his voice, rough and warm and full of love. Behind him, people were starting to leave quietly without the laughter and lightness they'd had before. The Platinum Lounge felt different now, heavier, more real. Mr. Donovan extended his hand. "Mr. Price, it's an honor to serve your account. If you or your mother need anything at all, you call me directly." He handed Ethan a business card with gold lettering. "And again, I apologize for how I treated you when you first arrived. I was wrong." Ethan shook his hand, surprised by how seriously the man was taking this. "It's okay, you didn't know. I should have treated you with respect regardless," Mr. Donovan said firmly. "That's a lesson I won't forget." Ethan tucked the envelope carefully into his backpack along with the folder and the business card. He turned to leave, his legs still shaky, his heart still pounding. As he walked toward those massive glass doors, he could feel eyes on him, but they felt different now, not mocking, not amused, just watching, just seeing him for who he actually was. He pushed through the doors and stepped out into the cool evening air. The city stretched out before him, a million lights beginning to flicker on as the sun set behind the skyscrapers. Everything looked the same as it had an hour ago, the same streets, the same buildings, the same world. But nothing was the same, nothing would ever be the same again. Ethan reached into his backpack and pulled out the envelope. His fingers traced his grandfather's handwriting. He wasn't ready to open it yet, but he would be soon. And when he did, he knew his grandfather would tell him exactly what to do next, because that's what he'd always done, guided him, protected him, loved him. Even now, even from beyond, his grandfather was still taking care of him. The tears came again, but this time they weren't just sad tears. They were grateful tears, overwhelmed tears, tears that said thank you and I miss you and I promise I'll make you proud all at once. Ethan walked down the steps of Sterling Heights Financial Center, a 10-year-old boy with $47 million and a letter from the only person who had ever believed he could be something extraordinary. And somewhere in a place beyond marble floors and crystal chandeliers, beyond laughter and judgment and numbers on a screen, Robert Price was smiling. Because his grandson had kept his promise, he had come to the tower, he had checked the balance, and now he understood. The apartment building where Ethan lived with his mother looked nothing like Sterling Heights Financial Center. There were no marble floors here, no crystal chandeliers, no golden lights reflecting off polished granite. The elevator worked only half the time, and the hallway on the third floor smelled like someone's dinner from 3 days ago, mixed with old carpet and cleaning solution that never quite cleaned anything. The paint on the walls was peeling in places, showing layers of different colors underneath, like the building itself was trying to remember what it used to be before time and neglect wore it down. But this was home. This was where Ethan had lived his entire life, where his mother worked double shifts and still somehow made him feel like the most important person in the world, where his grandfather used to visit every Sunday with stories and wisdom, and a smile that made everything feel possible. Ethan stood outside apartment 3F, his hand on the doorknob, the envelope from his grandfather pressed against his chest inside his jacket. He could hear the television through the door, one of those game shows his mom liked to watch when she got home from her shift at the diner. She worked as a waitress 6 days a week, sometimes 7 when they needed the money. Her feet hurt every night. She never complained, but Ethan saw the way she winced when she took off her shoes, the way she rubbed her ankles while watching television, the way she fell asleep on the couch before she even made it to her bedroom. She was only 32 years old, but sometimes she looked 50, worn down by a life that demanded more than it ever gave back. Ethan turned the knob and stepped inside. The apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, and a living room that doubled as a dining room and storage space, and everything else they needed it to be. But his mom had made it warm. There were pictures on the walls, family photos in mismatched frames, drawings Ethan had made in elementary school that she refused to take down even though he begged her to because they were embarrassing. There was a blanket on the couch that his grandmother had knitted before she passed, soft and worn and smelling faintly of lavender. There was love in this apartment, even if there wasn't much of anything else. His mother, Catherine Price, looked up from the couch when he walked in. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, dark strands escaping around her face. She wore her waitress uniform, a pink dress with a white apron that had a coffee stain near the pocket she hadn't been able to wash out. Her eyes were tired, but they lit up when she saw him, the way they always did, like he was the only good thing in her entire day. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, smiling. "How was your day? Did you go to the library like you said?" Ethan stood in the doorway, his backpack heavy on his shoulders, heavier now than it had ever been before. He didn't know how to answer her. How did you tell your mother that everything she'd been working for, everything she'd been sacrificing for, everything she'd been struggling with for 10 years didn't have to happen anymore? How did you tell her that the world had just changed completely and nothing would ever be the same? "Mom," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Her smile faded slightly. She sat up straighter, reaching for the remote to mute the television. "What's wrong? Did something happen at school? Are you okay?" "I'm okay," he said quickly, "but I need to tell you something and I need you to sit down." "I am sitting down," she said, her voice edging toward worry. "Ethan, you're scaring me. What happened?" He walked over and sat beside her on the couch, setting his backpack on the floor between his feet. He unzipped it slowly and pulled out the folder, the one with all the documents, the account numbers, the legal papers, the business card from Mr. Donovan. He placed it in her lap. "I went to Sterling Heights Financial Center today," he said. "Grandpa told me to go there when I turned 10. He said I had an account there. He made me promise I'd check it." Catherine's face went pale. She stared down at the folder like it was something dangerous. "Ethan, what are you talking about? Your grandfather never mentioned any account, and Sterling Heights, that's for rich people. Why would he send you there?" "I didn't understand either," Ethan said. "But he left me instructions. He left a lot of things, Mom." She opened the folder with trembling hands. Her eyes scanned the first page, moving quickly at first, then slowing down, then stopping completely. Her mouth opened slightly. No sound came out. She turned to the second page, then the third. Her hands started shaking so badly she almost dropped the folder. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "What is this? This says $47 million. That can't be real. This has to be a mistake." "It's not a mistake," Ethan said softly. They checked. 3 different people checked. It's real, Mom. Grandpa opened an account for me when I was born. He put money in it every month. He invested it. He made it grow, and now it's mine. It's ours." Catherine covered her mouth with her hand. Tears spilled down her cheeks, falling onto the papers in her lap. She shook her head back and forth like she was trying to deny what she was seeing, trying to make it not be true, because if it was true then that meant her father had been doing this the whole time, building this in secret while she worked herself to exhaustion, while they scraped by on tips and overtime, while she went to bed every night wondering if they'd have enough for rent and groceries and electricity. "Why?" she gasped. "Why didn't he tell me? Why did he let me work like this? Why did he let us struggle?" Ethan pulled out the envelope, the one with his name written in his grandfather's handwriting. "There's a letter. I haven't opened it yet. I wanted to wait for you." She looked at the envelope and a sob broke from her chest, raw and painful. She took it from him with shaking hands, holding it like it was made of glass. For a long moment she just stared at it, at that familiar handwriting, at the last words her father had left for them. Then very carefully she opened it. Inside were 3 pages, handwritten, every word deliberate and clear. Catherine read silently, her tears falling faster now, her shoulders shaking. Ethan waited, his own eyes burning, his throat tight. Finally she lowered the letter and looked at him, and in her eyes was a mixture of grief and love and understanding that went deeper than anything words could express. "Read it out loud," Ethan whispered, "please." Catherine nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She cleared her throat and began to read, her voice soft and breaking but determined. "My dear Ethan, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. You found what I left for you. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about this while I was alive. I'm sorry I couldn't explain it to your mother either, but I need you both to understand why I did things this way. Catherine, my beautiful daughter, I watched you work yourself to the bone for 10 years and it broke my heart every single day. You're probably angry with me right now. You're probably wondering why I let you struggle when I had the means to help. The truth is, I did help, every month. I took money from my pension, from my savings, from every place I could, and I put it into Ethan's account. But I didn't just give it to you directly because I was afraid that if you knew about it you'd stop working so hard, you'd stop teaching Ethan what it means to earn something, to fight for something, to value something. I grew up with money, Catherine. My father left me comfortable, and it made me weak, it made me lazy. It took me years to understand the value of hard work, to learn what my father should have taught me from the beginning. I didn't want that for Ethan. I wanted him to grow up knowing what it means to struggle, to see his mother sacrifice, to understand that money isn't given, it's earned. I wanted him to have character before he had wealth, because wealth without character destroys people. I've seen it happen. I didn't want it to happen to my grandson." Catherine's voice broke completely. She couldn't continue. Ethan took the letter from her hands and kept reading, his own voice shaking. "Ethan, by the time you read this, you'll be 10 years old. You'll have watched your mother work harder than anyone should have to work. You'll have seen her tired, seen her struggle, seen her sacrifice everything for you. And I hope that's taught you something important. I hope it's taught you that money is just a tool. It's what you do with it that matters. I'm giving you this wealth, but I'm trusting you to use it wisely, not to waste it, not to let it change who you are. Your mother raised you right, even though I made it harder than it needed to be. She taught you kindness and humility and gratitude. Don't lose those things. Don't let money make you forget where you came from or who you are. Use this gift to help people, to make the world better, to honor the sacrifices your mother made and the love she showed you every single day. And Catherine, please forgive me, I know this was hard, I know you're angry, but look at your son, look at the person he's become. That happened because you were strong, because you showed him what strength looks like. That's worth more than any amount of money I could have given you. I love you both more than words can say. Take care of each other, make me proud. All my love, Dad. The apartment fell silent except for the sound of both of them crying. Catherine pulled Ethan into her arms and held him so tight he could barely breathe, but he didn't care. They sat there on that worn-out couch in that tiny apartment, holding each other while the weight of 10 years crashed down on them all at once. All the exhaustion, all the worry, all the nights wondering if they'd make it, all of it poured out in tears that wouldn't stop. He was right, Catherine whispered into Ethan's hair. I am angry, I'm so angry at him, but I understand. God help me, I understand. They stayed like that for a long time until the tears slowed and the television flickered silently in the background and the world outside their window grew dark. Finally, Catherine pulled back, wiping her face with her hands, trying to compose herself. There's something else in the folder, Ethan said. Mr. Donovan said there's a monthly allowance, $20,000 a month, starting today. It goes into an account Grandpa opened in your name. Catherine's eyes went wide. $20,000 a month. Ethan nodded. And the main account, I can't touch it until I'm 18, but the allowance is for us, for you, so you don't have to work like this anymore. She stared at him and for a moment she looked lost, like someone had just told her the sky was green and the grass was blue. $20,000 a month. She made barely $2,000 a month at the diner, and that was on a good month with decent tips. This was 10 times that. This was more money than she knew what to do with. I don't know if I can stop working, she said quietly. I don't know if I know how to do that. You don't have to stop, Ethan said. But you could work less, you could rest, you could sleep in your bed instead of on the couch, you could get new shoes that don't hurt your feet, you could do all the things you never let yourself do because you were taking care of me. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I'd do it all again, you know, every shift, every tired night, every sacrifice, you're worth all of it. I know, Ethan whispered, but now you don't have to. They sat together in the quiet, processing what this meant, what it would change, what it wouldn't change. The apartment was still small. The paint was still peeling. The elevator still only worked half the time, but something fundamental had shifted, like the earth had tilted on its axis and they were standing in a completely different world than they'd woken up in. What do we do now? Catherine asked, her voice small and uncertain. Ethan thought about his grandfather's letter, about the words that had been chosen so carefully. Use this gift to help people, to make the world better. We keep being who we are, he said. We just do it without worrying about money. Catherine laughed, a small broken sound that was half sob, half relief. That's going to take some getting used to. Yeah, Ethan agreed, but we'll figure it out together. She pulled him close again, kissing the top of his head. Your grandfather would be so proud of you, walking into that building all by yourself, keeping your promise to him. You're braver than I ever was at 10 years old. I learned it from you, Ethan said. You're the bravest person I know. They sat in the glow of the television in their tiny apartment that suddenly felt both smaller and bigger than it ever had before. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that 2 lives had just been transformed. Cars honked, people walked by, the world kept spinning. But inside apartment 3F, everything had stopped and started again all at once. Catherine eventually stood up, wiping her eyes one more time. I'm going to make us dinner, something good, not just peanut butter sandwiches. Mom, you don't have to. I want to, she interrupted gently. I need to do something normal, something that makes sense. Cooking makes sense. Ethan nodded and watched her walk into the kitchen. He could hear her moving around, opening cabinets, pulling out pots and pans, normal sounds, familiar sounds, sounds that said some things didn't have to change even when everything else did. He picked up the folder again and looked through the papers more carefully. There were investment statements showing stocks in companies he'd heard of, tech giants and retailers and pharmaceutical companies. There were property deeds to buildings he didn't know existed. There were accounts and sub-accounts and portfolios that would take years to fully understand. His grandfather had built something incredibly complex, incredibly sophisticated, all while living in a modest house and driving a 15-year-old car and wearing the same jacket every winter. One paper caught his attention. It was a list, handwritten, titled Instructions for Ethan. He pulled it out and read. 1. Finish school, all of it. High school, college, whatever comes after, education is more valuable than money. 2. Don't tell anyone about this wealth, not friends, not teachers, not anyone outside your immediate family. Wealth attracts the wrong kind of attention. 3. Live below your means. Just because you have money doesn't mean you should spend it foolishly. 4. Give generously but wisely. Help people who genuinely need it, not people who just want it. 5. Remember where you came from. Never forget what your mother sacrificed. Never let money make you think you're better than anyone else. 6. When you're old enough, learn how to manage this wealth yourself. Don't rely on others to do it for you. 7. Use this money to create opportunities, not just for yourself but for others. Build things, help things grow, make the world better. 8. If you ever feel lost or overwhelmed, read this letter again. And remember that I believed in you. I always believed in you. Ethan read the list 3 times, memorizing every word. These weren't just instructions. They were a roadmap. A guide for how to live with something most people never had to navigate. His grandfather had thought of everything, planned for everything, tried to protect him from all the ways money could corrupt or destroy. From the kitchen came the smell of something cooking, onions and garlic, and something else that made his stomach growl. His mother was humming, an old song his grandmother used to sing, and the sound was both heartbreaking and beautiful. Ethan folded the paper carefully and put it back in the folder. Then he pulled out his grandfather's letter and read it one more time, slower now, absorbing every word. Wealth without character destroys people. He thought about the people at Sterling Heights, the ones who had laughed, who had mocked, who had assumed he was nothing because he looked like nothing. They had wealth. Some of them probably had more than $47 million, but his grandfather was right. Money alone didn't make someone worthwhile. It was what you did with it, how you treated people, who you became when no one was watching. Ethan made a promise to himself right then, sitting on that worn-out couch in that tiny apartment with peeling paint and an elevator that barely worked. He promised he would never be like those people. He would never look at someone and decide their worth based on their clothes or their shoes or where they came from. He would never forget what it felt like to be laughed at, dismissed, treated like he didn't matter. His mother called from the kitchen, "Dinner's ready, sweetheart." Ethan stood up and walked into the kitchen. The table was set, 2 plates, 2 glasses of water, and a pot of spaghetti with sauce his mother had made from scratch. It wasn't fancy, it would never appear in a 5-star restaurant, but it was made with love, and that made it worth more than anything money could buy. They sat down together and ate in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that comes from 2 people who understand each other completely. Every now and then Catherine would look at him, her eyes still red from crying, and she'd smile like she was seeing him for the first time. And maybe she was. Maybe they were both seeing each other differently now, seeing their lives differently, seeing the future differently. After dinner, Ethan helped wash the dishes. His mother stood beside him at the sink, her hands in warm, soapy water, and she said quietly, "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" "Yeah," Ethan said, "we're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long time, in maybe his entire life, he absolutely believed it. 3 months passed like a dream that refused to end. The kind of dream where you kept waiting to wake up, but morning never came and reality kept insisting that impossible things were actually possible. Catherine had quit her job at the diner 2 weeks after that evening when Ethan came home with a folder full of documents that changed everything. Her boss, Mr. Henderson, a man who'd worked her 6 days a week for 7 years and never once given her a raise, had the nerve to look offended when she handed in her notice. He'd said something about loyalty and reliability and how hard it would be to replace her. Catherine had smiled politely and walked out the door without looking back. That felt better than any amount of money ever could. The apartment was still the same. They hadn't moved. Catherine insisted they stay, at least for now, at least until they figured out what this new life actually meant. The elevator still only worked half the time. The paint was still peeling, but Catherine had new shoes now, comfortable ones that didn't make her wince with every step. She slept in her bed instead of falling asleep on the couch. She smiled more. She laughed easier. The lines around her eyes, the ones that had been carved deep by exhaustion and worry, were starting to soften. Ethan had gone back to school the Monday after visiting Sterling Heights, and he'd kept his mouth shut about everything. That was one of the hardest things he'd ever done. His best friend Marcus Chen kept asking him why he seemed different, why he looked like he was carrying some huge secret. Ethan just shrugged and said everything was fine. Another kid in his class, Tyler Brooks, had gotten a new phone and wouldn't stop bragging about it, showing it off like it was the greatest thing that had ever existed. Ethan had to bite his tongue to keep from saying that he could buy 1,000 of those phones and it wouldn't even make a dent in his account. But his grandfather's words echoed in his head constantly. Don't tell anyone about this wealth. Wealth attracts the wrong kind of attention. So he stayed quiet. He wore the same clothes. He ate the same lunch. He acted like nothing had changed, even though everything had. But today was different. Today was the day Catherine had insisted they do something his grandfather had specifically mentioned in another document they'd found buried in the folder. A document titled "When You're Ready." Inside were instructions for a meeting with his grandfather's lawyer, a man named Gerald Whitmore, who had apparently been handling the account and investments for years without ever meeting Ethan. The appointment was set for 2 o'clock at a law office downtown, in a building that looked like it had been standing since before computers existed, all old brick and narrow windows and a lobby that smelled like leather and old paper. Catherine and Ethan walked into the building together, and this time Catherine was the one holding the folder. She dressed up for the occasion, wearing a navy blue dress she'd bought from a thrift store years ago but had never had anywhere nice enough to wear it to. Ethan wore his school clothes, jeans, and a sweater his mother had gotten him last Christmas. They still didn't look like wealthy people. They didn't carry themselves like wealthy people. But Catherine walked with her head higher now, with a confidence that hadn't been there 3 months ago, and that made all the difference. The receptionist directed them to the 3rd floor, to an office at the end of a long hallway lined with portraits of serious-looking men in suits who all seemed to be judging everyone who walked past them. The door at the end had a gold nameplate that read Gerald Whitmore, attorney at law. Catherine knocked twice. "Come in," called a voice from inside. They entered an office that looked exactly like what Ethan imagined a lawyer's office should look like. Dark wood everywhere, bookshelves crammed with thick legal volumes that probably weighed more than he did, a massive desk covered in neat stacks of papers, and behind that desk sat a man who looked to be in his 60s, with white hair, sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a face that seemed kind despite its serious expression. He stood when they entered, coming around the desk with his hand extended. "Mrs. Price, and you must be Ethan," he said warmly, shaking both their hands. "Please sit. I've been waiting for this meeting for 10 years. They sat in 2 leather chairs that were so comfortable Ethan immediately understood why rich people liked expensive furniture. Mr. Whitmore returned to his seat and folded his hands on the desk, looking at them both with something that might have been fondness or might have been professional courtesy. Ethan couldn't tell which. "First, let me say how sorry I am about Robert's passing," Mr. Whitmore began. "He was not only a client but a friend, a good man, one of the best I ever knew." "Thank you," Catherine said quietly. "He spoke highly of you as well. I found notes he'd written mentioning how much he trusted you." Mr. Whitmore smiled slightly. "That trust was mutual. Robert came to me 11 years ago with a plan. He wanted to build something for his grandson, something that would last, something that would give the boy security and opportunity without spoiling him. He was very specific about how it should be done. We met every month to review the investments, adjust the strategy, make sure everything was growing the way he wanted it to. He was meticulous. Brilliant, actually. Some of the investment choices he made I would have never recommended, but he had instincts I've rarely seen. And he was almost always right." Ethan leaned forward. Did he know how big it would get? "He hoped," Mr. Whitmore said, "but I don't think even he anticipated it would grow to 47 million. He was aiming for 10, maybe 15 if everything went perfectly. But the market cooperated, his choices paid off better than expected, and here we are." He pulled out a thick folder from a drawer and set it on the desk. "This contains everything, full accounting of every investment, every property, every asset. But more importantly, it contains Robert's wishes for how this wealth should be managed and eventually used." Catherine and Ethan exchanged glances. "We found some instructions," Catherine said, "in the folder at the bank." "Those were the basic guidelines," Mr. Whitmore confirmed. "This is more detailed, much more detailed. Robert spent the last 2 years of his life writing this. He wanted to make sure Ethan understood not just what he had, but why he had it and what it was meant for." He opened the folder and pulled out a bound document, maybe 50 pages thick. "This is essentially a manual, a guidebook. Robert called it the foundation of a good life. He wrote it specifically for you, Ethan." Ethan's throat tightened. His grandfather had spent 2 years writing him a book. 2 years planning, thinking, preparing for a future he wouldn't be part of. The weight of that love felt crushing and beautiful at the same time. Mr. Whitmore slid the document across the desk. "I won't make you read it here. Take it home, study it, but I can summarize some of the key points. First, Robert set up a trust that you can't fully access until you're 25, not 18. He believed 18 was too young, that most people don't develop real wisdom until their mid-20s. Until then, you have the monthly allowance for you and your mother, and you have access to funds for education, medical expenses, and what Robert called character-building experiences, which include travel, volunteering, and learning opportunities." "What happens at 25?" Ethan asked. "You gain full control," Mr. Whitmore said, "but Robert included recommendations, not requirements, for how he hoped you'd use it. He wanted you to consider starting a foundation, using a portion of the wealth to help others, specifically people in situations similar to what you and your mother experienced. Single parents struggling to make ends meet, kids who need opportunities they can't afford." He believed wealth should circulate, should do good, should lift people up rather than just sitting in an account growing larger. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. That sounds exactly like him. There's more, Mr. Whitmore continued. Robert also set aside specific amounts for certain purposes. $1 million is designated for your college education, wherever you choose to go, whatever you choose to study. Another $1 million is set aside for what he called your mother's dreams. Catherine, he wanted you to have the freedom to pursue whatever you'd given up to raise Ethan. Whether that's education, starting a business, traveling, whatever brings you joy. Catherine covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed. I don't even know what my dreams are anymore. I stopped dreaming a long time ago. Then you have time to remember, Mr. Whitmore said gently, or to discover new ones. That's what Robert wanted, for both of you to have time and freedom and options. Ethan picked up the bound document, feeling the weight of it in his hands. 50 pages of his grandfather's thoughts, wisdom, hopes. It felt sacred. Can I ask you something, Mr. Whitmore? Of course. Why did he do it this way? Why all the secrecy? Why make my mom work so hard when he could have helped us the whole time? Mr. Whitmore leaned back in his chair, considering the question carefully. I asked him that same question many times. Every time I saw how hard your mother was working, I'd tell Robert he should help her more directly. But he always said the same thing. He said that struggle builds character in a way comfort never can. He said that if you grew up watching your mother sacrifice for you, you'd understand the value of sacrifice. You'd understand hard work, perseverance, love that costs something. He believed that understanding would make you a better man than money ever could. And he believed that if he just gave your mother everything, she'd never develop the strength and resilience he knew she'd need to guide you through life. He paused, looking directly at Catherine. He didn't make you work because he didn't care. He made you work because he cared so much he was willing to be the villain in your story if it meant his grandson would grow up right. Catherine was crying openly now. I was so angry at him when I found out, part of me still is, but I look at Ethan, at the person he's becoming, and I see what my father saw. I see why he did it this way. He knew you'd be angry, Mr. Whitmore said. He wrote about it. He said it was the hardest thing he ever did, watching you struggle and not intervening more than he did. But he believed in both of you. He believed you were strong enough to handle it and that Ethan would be better for having witnessed it. They sat in silence for a moment, letting those words settle. Outside the window, the city moved on, people rushing to appointments and jobs and lives that had nothing to do with this quiet office where a grandfather's love was being translated into legal terms and investment strategies and bound documents. Mr. Whitmore pulled out another paper. There's one more thing. Robert left specific instructions for today's meeting. He asked that I give you this after we discussed everything else. He handed Ethan a sealed envelope, smaller than the one from the bank but made of the same heavy cream-colored paper. Ethan took it carefully. His name was written on the front in his grandfather's handwriting, but underneath was a date. Open on the day you meet with Gerald Whitmore, 3 months after you've found the account. He timed it, Catherine whispered. He knew exactly when we'd be ready for whatever's in there. Ethan looked at his mother. She nodded. He opened the envelope and pulled out a single page, handwritten. The ink slightly faded in places like the letter had been written, rewritten, perfected over time. Dear Ethan, he read aloud, his voice shaking slightly. If you're reading this with Mr. Whitmore, then 3 months have passed since you found the account. 3 months of adjustment, of processing, of beginning to understand what this means. I hope these months have been kind to you and your mother. I hope you're starting to see the possibilities instead of just feeling overwhelmed. By now you've probably realized that money doesn't solve every problem. It doesn't bring back the people we've lost. It doesn't erase pain or grief or loneliness. What it does is remove certain barriers. It gives you time, it gives you options. It gives you the ability to focus on what really matters instead of constantly worrying about survival. I want you to use that gift wisely. I want you to remember that the most important things in life aren't things at all. They're people, relationships, experiences, moments of connection and love and growth. Money can facilitate those things, but it can't create them. You have to create them yourself. You and your mother have something special, a bond forged through hardship. Don't let money weaken that bond. Don't let it come between you or change how you treat each other. Use it to strengthen what you already have. Now I have a challenge for you, something I want you to do in the next year. Take $10,000 from the allowance and use it to help someone who doesn't expect it, someone who needs it but would never ask. Don't do it for recognition. Don't tell anyone about it. Just do it because it's right, because you can, because you understand what it's like to need help. And when you've done that, I want you to write down how it made you feel. Not how it made the other person feel, but how it made you feel, because that's the real lesson. Giving isn't about the receiver. It's about who we become when we choose to give. I love you, Ethan. I'm proud of you, not because of any money, but because of who you are. You're kind, you're thoughtful, you have your mother's heart and your grandmother's wisdom. Money will never change that unless you let it, so don't let it. Stay who you are, just do it with better shoes and a fuller refrigerator. All my love always, Grandpa. Ethan's tears fell onto the paper, blurring one of the words. He wiped his eyes quickly, not wanting to damage the letter. Catherine was crying too, reaching over to squeeze his hand. Mr. Whitmore pulled out a handkerchief and dabbed at his own eyes. Robert made me promise not to read that letter before giving it to you, but I see now why he wrote it. He was teaching you one more lesson, the most important one. What lesson? Ethan asked. That wealth is a responsibility, not just a privilege. That having more means you should do more, be more, give more. Most people never learn that. They accumulate and hoard and protect what they have. Robert wanted you to understand from the very beginning that money is meant to flow, to move, to do good in the world. Catherine spoke up, her voice steadier now. Mr. Whitmore, in your professional opinion, knowing what you know about this account and about my father's intentions, what should we do? How should we handle this? Oyer smiled. The same thing you've been doing for the past 3 months. Live your life. Let Ethan finish growing up. Don't make any major decisions right now. Don't buy a mansion or a sports car or try to suddenly live like millionaires. Those things can wait. What can't wait is Ethan's education, his development, his understanding of what this means. Read the guidebook Robert wrote, follow his suggestions, and most importantly, stay grounded. Stay connected to the people and values that made you who you are. Ethan looked down at the letter in his hands, at his grandfather's final challenge. Help someone who doesn't expect it. Someone who needs it but would never ask. An idea was already forming in his mind, something he'd been thinking about ever since he walked out of Sterling Heights Financial Center 3 months ago. Can I ask you for advice about something? Ethan said. Of course, Mr. Whitmore replied. There's a kid at my school. His name is Jordan Davis. His mom is a single parent like mine was. She works 2 jobs. Jordan comes to school tired a lot. His shoes have holes in them. He never has lunch money, so he usually just doesn't eat. I've been sharing my lunch with him since 3rd grade, but he always looks embarrassed about it. Ethan paused, choosing his words carefully. I want to help him, his family, but I don't want him to feel bad about it. I don't want him to know it came from me. How do I do that? Mr. Whitmore and Catherine exchanged a look. The lawyer nodded slowly, approvingly. That's exactly the kind of thinking your grandfather hoped you'd develop, and there are ways to do it. Anonymous donations, gift cards that appear without explanation. There are organizations that help families in need, and donations can be made in ways that protect everyone's dignity. We can work together to figure out the best approach. But, Catherine added, placing her hand on Ethan's shoulder, we need to be careful. We can't help everyone, and we need to make sure we're helping in ways that actually help, not just throwing money at problems. Your mother's right, Mr. Whitmore agreed. Good intentions aren't enough, you need wisdom too. That's why your grandfather wanted you to take time to learn, to grow into this responsibility instead of having it all at once. They spent the next hour discussing practical matters. Bank accounts, investment strategies, tax implications, legal protections. Mr. Whitmore explained how the trust was structured, how the monthly allowance worked, what expenses could be covered and what couldn't. He gave them contact information for financial advisors, accountants, people Robert had trusted. He showed them documents and forms and explained terms that sounded like a foreign language to Ethan. But through it all, Ethan kept thinking about his grandfather. About a man who had lived modestly and worked carefully and planned meticulously, all so his grandson would have opportunities he'd never had. About a man who understood that the greatest gift you could give someone wasn't money, but the character to use money well. When the meeting finally ended, Mr. Whitmore walked them to the door. Ethan, he said, your grandfather asked me to tell you one more thing when we met. He said to tell you that wealth is like water. If you dam it up and keep it for yourself, it stagnates and becomes useless. But if you let it flow, if you share it and use it to nourish the world around you, it creates life everywhere it goes. He wanted you to be a river, not a dam. Ethan nodded, committing those words to memory alongside everything else his grandfather had taught him. They left the office and walked back through the lobby, past the portraits of serious men, past the receptionist who smiled at them without knowing she was smiling at a 10-year-old millionaire, and his mother who finally didn't have to work herself to exhaustion anymore. They stepped out onto the street where the afternoon sun was warm and the city was alive with movement and possibility. Catherine stopped on the sidewalk and looked down at Ethan. You know what we should do? Let's go get ice cream, the good kind, from that place downtown that's too expensive but makes it fresh every day. Ethan grinned, can we afford it? Catherine laughed, really laughed in a way that sounded like freedom. Yeah, sweetheart, I think we can afford it. They walked together toward the ice cream shop, and Ethan thought about everything that had happened since that evening 3 months ago when he'd walked into Sterling Heights Financial Center with nothing but a promise to his grandfather. He thought about Mr. Donovan's face when he saw the account balance. He thought about his mother crying over his grandfather's letters. He thought about the guidebook now sitting in his backpack, 50 pages of wisdom waiting to be absorbed. He thought about Jordan Davis and the holes in his shoes and how good it would feel to help without being seen. Most of all, he thought about his grandfather, somewhere beyond reach but somehow still present in every dollar, every instruction, every carefully crafted plan. Robert Price had spent the last years of his life building something that would outlast him, something that would protect and guide and teach long after his voice had gone silent. And standing there on a sunny street corner waiting for the light to change so they could cross and get that expensive ice cream, Ethan made a promise. Not to his grandfather this time, but to himself. He promised he would honor this gift. He would learn everything there was to learn about managing wealth wisely. He would help people the way his grandfather had helped him. He would stay humble and kind and grateful no matter how many zeros appeared in his account balance. He would be a river, not a dam. The light changed. Catherine took his hand and they crossed the street together, a mother and son who had survived hardship and found unexpected abundance and were learning, one day at a time, what it meant to have both struggle and success written into their story. Behind them, the law office grew smaller. Ahead of them, the ice cream shop waited with its cheerful awning and the smell of fresh waffle cones drifting through the open door. And somewhere in a place beyond buildings and streets and bank accounts, Robert Price was smiling. Because his grandson had kept every promise, had walked into that tower with courage, had checked the balance, had understood the lesson, and now, most importantly, was learning to live not as someone defined by wealth but as someone who would use wealth to define goodness in the world. The 10-year-old boy who had once walked into a room full of millionaires and been laughed at was now walking into his future with his head high and his heart full, and his grandfather's wisdom lighting the way forward. And that was worth more than $47 million could ever buy. Thank you for watching this story through to the end. If it touched your heart, if it reminded you that wealth means nothing without character, if it made you think about the people in your life who sacrificed for you, please subscribe to this channel to support our growth. We share stories that matter, stories that change perspectives, stories that remind us what it means to be human. Drop a comment below about what this story meant to you, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, remember, be a river, not a dam. Let goodness flow through you into the world. The end.